a lot of people who do make comics both inside and outside of Japan, it's not exactly always a lucrative and stable profession.
一本漫画就是说，现在其实大家很流行就是 IP 的思维。
I can see a tendency of serializing in the sense that one work has increasingly many volumes in Taiwan as well.
Hello and welcome to Connected. I'm Tomasz Koper, sitting in for Divya Gopalan. How often do you meet people supporting themselves through their passions? How hard is it to go from making art to making a living? Can manga and comic artists thrive in the age of the internet? Today, we continue on conversation about manga and comics in Taiwan and around the world. And inking and coloring our understanding of the topic with their expertise, we once again welcome Adina Zemanek, who is a lecturer at the University of Central Lancashire, and Stevie Suan, an assistant professor at Hosei University in Japan. Stevie, manga in Japan is obviously a massive, massive industry, and we can talk a lot about the artistic value of works from Japan, from different countries, but really, isn't it true that money talks? With this kind of investment, is there even a space on international markets for comics and manga that are not Japanese?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's it's kind of complicated because there are, I think, different spheres of comics cultures around the world. So, for instance, U.S. American superhero comics, for instance, or Western European bande dessinée, and different spheres in which those tend to be popular in, and they themselves also, I think, have their own kind of global followings. Increasingly, though, I think on the internet, with different types of distribution technologies, things like, social media, but also people able to kind of make subscription services and their own Patreons, etc. There is I think, increase in comics producers who are doing things on a, much smaller scale in terms of the people involved in the production. That, though, can have its own precarity, and I think, historically, for a lot of people who do make comics both inside and outside of Japan, it's not exactly always a lucrative and stable profession either.
And Adina, what is the business side of the Taiwanese manhwa industry like? Can Taiwanese artists, maybe outside of the top 5, top 10, support themselves through their artistic work?
Well, many of them cannot and need to combine creating comics with other kinds of commissioned work. For example, because many of them study design, many of them also do design work or illustration as well as comics. But I would say that during the last few years, the government investment in developing comics in Taiwan has also made it easier for artists to focus on creating comics. So generally, this occupation is a precarious one, as in Taiwan as well, as Stevie said. But it has been easier during this recent few years.
So what has happened that made it easier? Is it just government subsidies, or is it also other forms of transforming the industry?
Well, there are many aspects to this. A major incentive, a major factor has been government investment indeed. Since 2016-18, I think, these programs have started. So there are subsidies, there are stipends for artists, there is financing for publishers. And this has already introduced major changes in the industry, in this media ecology. So there are simply more possibilities for comics artists, more possibilities of work, also technology. Apart from paper, printed books, and electronic versions of books, of traditional books, there are also platforms in Taiwan, whether a local one called CCC, Creative Comic Collection, or Korean major platforms starting to enter the Taiwanese market.
In the last episode, we talked about Taiwanese manga and all the things that make it unique. But in reality, most manga read by Taiwanese fans comes from Japan. Once again, we asked filmmaker Jay Chern to give us a glimpse into how local publishers go against this trend and promote domestic works. Take a look.
自从网络的这种就是社交平台出来之后，也有一些漫画它其实是用一个比如说4格的方式在网络上面连载，后来受到欢迎就是集结出书，然后甚至也有改编成动画。比如说像是那个勇者系列的这个漫画，那它在网络上面是以一个一则一则的故事，然后蕴含一点对于人性跟社会的一个探讨。那后来就是它就有改编成一部动画影集。其实我们还是可以观察到一些漫画家他们是可以盈利，然后就是营生的，那只是可能人数相对而言是比较少的。那另外就是说，可能台湾之前是比较缺乏像日本这样子很健全的一个工业化的一个环境。
In Taiwan, 90% of the manga and anime market is dominated by Japan, making it very difficult for Taiwan's local manga artists to compete. However, Ocean is looking hopeful, seeing sales of Taiwanese manga improving each year. He is also looking into using AI and new technologies to promote Taiwanese manga to a worldwide audience.
For the full version of the video, visit our website or YouTube channels. Adina, do you share Ocean's, the publisher's, optimism about the future of the manhwa industry here in Taiwan?
Well, definitely, because as I mentioned, there is during these recent years, I've seen an unprecedented flourishing of the unprecedented production in Taiwan. So there are more artists, more works, more avenues, more platforms for publishing, and also concerted efforts by the government to promote Taiwanese comics abroad to international audiences.
Well, Stevie, Japan, I'm sure, wasn't always the manga industrial powerhouse it is today. So can you tell us, are there any parallels between what is kind of happening right now in Taiwan and how the industry got started in Japan?
Well, the industry in Japan, it dates back to about a century ago, probably a little bit further, depending on where you want to make those those lines. Really, in the 60s and 70s, did manga start to take off as this kind of media that a lot of people within Japan are reading regularly. Part of, I think, this really big shift is oddly a shift in format, where when manga started to be standardized within what's now known as the tankobon format, or the kind of standard booklet size that we see, that it wasn't just isolated to magazines or for rental shops, but also something that was easily accessible to people, but also portable and able to be moved around. So perhaps some of the parallels, I think, are in this new shift that we're seeing now to even within Japan, digital manga becoming a real powerhouse. So that we're moving away from just printed formats into other formats in the smartphone and etc. That I think also in some ways offer some opportunities for expansion.
Well, I think there is one more substantial difference between what we see in Taiwan and what we see in Japan in terms of manga. But for that, let's go to another expert opinion. Different countries seem to have very different approaches to fostering and promoting their comics industries. So we once again turn to Zhuang Yongxin, who goes by his pen name Xiao Zhuang, to tell us what sets the Taiwanese manhwa industry apart from its neighbors. Take a look.
只是说，政府这几年开始有在关注漫画，然后也开始在借鉴这个，不管是韩国经验或者是国外的经验，开始有去参考，然后有去思想说，怎么样让台湾的漫画可以更进一步。 那一本漫画就是说，现在其实大家很流行就是 IP 的思维，就是说如果漫画它本身不要停留在它最后只是一本书，而是它是一个 IP 的创造，那可能漫画是一开始，但是这 IP 还要往后持续的去延续的话，那这个其实很需要各个不同产业的整合。那当这个产业有整合的时候，市场规模才会变大，那也才会改变这个创作的模式。那我们现在的模式都是手工业嘛，就是说，都因为你就是抽版税啊，然后收稿费啊，所以你当然就是一个人做。那一个人做有个好处就是它会产生很多的风格家。因为你都是一个人在掌握，所以很多人如果你个人有特殊的风格，它很容易产生出来。但是它的限制就是说，你没有办法像台湾做这些漫画的前置作业，尤其像田野调查的部分是完全没有费用的。所以如果你要去深入研究某一个议题，你必须得花自己的时间。那但是当你有一个 IP 的规模，比如说这个题目原本它就是要变成漫画、变成剧本、变成其他的东西的时候，那可能透过投资，透过政府的补助也好，企业的投资也好，那我们就只是在做这个 IP 的一部分，那你才会开始有这些费用会进来。但是他这样一做出来，我们也会看到说他们所有人物的设定都是为了日后要做公仔，所以正面、侧面、背面长什么样子都很确定的，头发的角度、眼睛的大小、人物身高的比例，它就是一个像生产线的模型。所以当它未来要转换成动画、转换成公仔，全部都是一次到位就上线了。那我觉得这个是一种选择啦，就是说一个健康的市场里面，你应当有这样子的作品，但是你也有非常商业性大型的作品都能够生存，那对整个环境才是最好的。
So, Adina, it almost seems like Taiwan has a manhua cottage industry compared to the kind of large-scale industrialized production of manga, including IPs and franchises that we see in Japan. But do you think this is a necessary element for a financial success of an industry? Or can Taiwan keep relying on these sort of smaller scale, less mainstream, more individualistic works and still be successful?
Well, this issue has many aspects. One thing that just came to my mind right now as I was watching the clip, the recording with Xiao Zhuang, was the fact that I have heard Taiwanese publishers, saying that Taiwanese artists are not yet mature in terms of storytelling skills. So many of them simply do not have the skills or have insufficient skills for developing a long narrative. So they are still practicing in this respect. So that's one of the things that still needs probably development in Taiwan. There is, on the other hand, a push from the government to encourage this transmedia merchandise, this kind of financial plans of developing narratives or characters across a variety of media. There are initiatives in this direction, but also in this individualized. I think that this individualized pattern will also be maintained because of Taiwan's connections. One of the reasons may be Taiwan's connections with European markets. There are Taiwanese artists publishing their works first in France, for instance, and then being translated or adapting their works for publication in Taiwan. So I think that both patterns would be viable.
So, Stevie, Adina mentioned long-form storytelling, these serialized manga that often get turned into anime. But I know there are voices of criticism saying that this is a way to sort of pad out the runtime of an anime, or a way to just sell more issues of a comic book. Do you think that this is a sort of creative trade-off that artists are making in order to sell more issues to kind of sustain their incomes?
So I think that's part of it is, I think, a matter of perspective. I think that there's, especially for something like manga and for anime in particular, there's a lot of conventions, and in Japanese the word is often called like oyakusoku or yakusoku goto, which is like directly meaning like what's promised. But I think it's better translated as something like convention, maybe cliche, but something like what's expected of from readers. And so I think a lot of these narrative patterns and kind of extended story arcs is also what people want. They like to have, extended stories that go over years and years and years, or they get really attached to characters, and the certain patterns that we see in these works really facilitate that quite well. So in my view, I think it's actually kind of a creative tool to be able to utilize and rely on these types of conventions.
I know, I see Adina wants to jump in here.
Yes, I wanted to add that actually I can see a tendency of serializing in the sense that one work has increasingly many volumes in Taiwan as well. So yeah, in terms of this developing storytelling skills across a long and serialized narrative in many volumes, this is present in Taiwan as well, increasingly, I think.
So, well, serializing stories is one thing, but do you feel that there are other trade-offs, other sacrifices that creators make in order to fit into this industrialized production process of manga turned into anime, turned into figures, turned into cards, turned into other forms of collectibles? Stevie, what do you think?
Well, I think, yeah, it's a bit of a give and take, I think. So as the artist who we were just watching pointed out, there is this kind of this understanding that you're going to have the media made, this particular character made into another media. So that's going to affect, I think, a certain degree of the type of expressions that are available. On the other hand, it also opens up a whole repertoire of tools and character design styles and line work styles that people are already receptive to and engage with. So I think that's kind of the trickiness of this type of, I guess we might call it like a type of creativity of borrowing this type of visual language, where on the one hand you kind of are forced within these types of patterns and you can add your own twist to it, but on the other hand it allows you to have a ready vocabulary to work with, and also people who are receptive to them. And your expression of it also adds to that mix.
Well, there's one aspect of the industry that we haven't talked about yet, connected to the internet, which is, as we all know, changing everything. So again, let's turn to an expert opinion. So, as we've discussed, one of the new ways in which fans enjoy their comics is webtoons, known in Taiwan as tiaoman. These are designed to be viewed on a smartphone and are blowing up in countries like Korea. At the recent comic exhibition in Taipei, we caught up with Zhang Yinjie from the Creative Comic Collection, a platform under the Taiwan Creative Content Agency. She told us a bit about Taiwan's efforts to enter the webtoon market.
那我们这边主要都是在呼吁，就是台湾的原创漫画家为主。那我们的平台上，就是有进行相关的连载作品的连载。那这边的话，也会以创作者以台湾为主。那相关的作品量非常的丰富，有包含就是幽默啊，或是爱情，或是搞笑，或是历史，或是少年冒险等等丰富不同的作品。我觉得台湾的漫画其实受日本的漫画影响蛮深的，对。但是在台湾的漫画创作而言，其实作者们会加入更多自己的一些心路历程进去发表创作。那台湾的创作者其实是很天马行空，因为有可能是从台湾的职人的部分，或是一些地方的小故事， 或是一些历史的文化，都可以衍生成一部漫画作品。
So, Stevie, what has been the impact of webtoons and this new way, this transition from the medium of paper to a phone screen on the industry overall?
Well, definitely the digital manga in both Japan and elsewhere in the world has really skyrocketed and exploded. One thing that certain recent research has pointed to is that the paneling style of scrolling manga versus the paneling style of traditional paper manga tends to be kind of quite different, often with larger uses of negative space in scrolling manga to make it easier to move through. So in that sense, it's becoming so popular that in fact certain, I guess I wouldn't call them trends, but certain types of, we might think of it as simplified versions of paneling that has been kind of inherited from this digital manga style has also found its way into somewhat traditional printed manga, or really manga that's made for in the traditional format of 2 pages instead of scrolling. So I think there's probably going to be a bit of a negotiation for some time as we start to globally get used to these different types of formats of publishing manga.
And Adina, platforms like CCC they still have a lot of catching up to do to giants like Webtoons from Korea. But is this maybe an opportunity for Taiwan, this kind of new aspect of the medium that is just now appearing, just now gaining traction and popularity? In other words, should Taiwan focus this aspect of the manga industry?
It is already focusing on this aspect of the manga industry, not only because the Taiwan Creative Content Agency is now administering this or having this established this platform CCC that is modeled on Webtoons platforms. Also because, as I mentioned, Webtoon platforms are also now active in Taiwan as well, and they have their Taiwanese offices, and also the Golden Comic Award is granting awards to creators publishing their works initially on this sort of platform. So this is already ongoing in Taiwan. It also has implications for how artists debut, how they are trained, how they earn. Publishing comics on platforms also involves artists making their debut and not necessarily being trained in creating comics. Amateurs who happen to be successful on this platform, so they are launched. This in Taiwan is not yet happening to that extent, I would say, because much of what is published on the CCC platform is already published, are works that are already published in printed version. And I don't know how the CCC platform functions in terms of remunerating artists for their work. But in this respect, I think that this platform differs from the well-known Korean ones.
As Taiwan is trying to promote domestic and foreign consumption of comics and manhwa, can Taiwanese works resonate with fans in far-flung places of the world? Svitlana Pryzynchuk, the CEO of the Ukrainian publisher Safron, talks about the challenges and opportunities for Taiwanese manhwa. Take a look.
It happened that the first title we basically published in December 2021, a few months before full-scale war. And but even immediately they started, the sales were very good until the beginning of war. That, of course, in terms of size, it's uncomparable with Japan, and maybe it will never be comparable, but as being very, very original on the market, as be very, had, their own base, had their own name, they had to have this brand of Taiwanese manhwa. The challenge is, I think from if I would be Taiwanese person who is in charge in this. It means that, like, basically, that to find more and more local partners in different countries, for example, like European countries, to support them in terms of publishing the Taiwanese manhwa in their countries. And I think it's a good time now for this, now, because of the geopolitics changed a lot since 2022, and this is a golden time for Taiwan. It's a golden time for Taiwan to use all this soft power to reach European audiences, to reach people, to reach countries that before was not that possible.
Well, these are some encouraging words. Unfortunately, they will have to be the final words that we hear in today's show because we have arrived at the end of our time. Thank you very much again to Adina Zemanek, who is a lecturer at the University of Central Lancashire, and Stevie Suan, who is an associate professor at Hosei University in Japan. And thank you to our audience at home for sticking with us through this two-part journey through the fantastic and creative world of manga, manhwa, and comics. It's been great to have your company. Goodbye and stay connected.